Karen beat my son's horse bloody with a riding crop, leaving Whisper trembling and broken in the dirt. 12-year-old Tommy cried over his tortured mare while that evil woman walked away laughing. The corrupt police did nothing. But some wounds never heal, some debts must be paid in blood. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun painted golden streaks across our small ranch as I watched my 12-year-old son Tommy gently brush his beloved horse, Whisper. The mare stood perfectly still, her dark brown coat shimmering under Tommy's careful attention. This daily ritual had become the most precious part of our day, a quiet moment of pure love before the world demanded our attention. Tommy had worked 3 long years to save enough money for Whisper. Every penny from his paper route, every birthday dollar from grandparents, every coin found in couch cushions went into his old coffee can labeled Horse Fund, in his crooked handwriting. When we finally had enough to visit the horse rescue center, Tommy walked past all the young, beautiful horses and stopped in front of Whisper's stall. She wasn't much to look at, an aging mare with a graying muzzle slightly swayed back, and sad eyes that spoke of past neglect. The rescue worker tried to steer us toward younger horses, but Tommy knelt down and looked directly into Whisper's eyes. "Dad," he whispered, his voice full of certainty. "This is her. She needs us and we need her." That was 2 years ago. In that time, Whisper had transformed from a broken, fearful animal into the gentlest soul I'd ever encountered. She followed Tommy around like a loyal dog, nickering softly whenever she heard his voice, and seemed to understand his every mood. Our property sat on the edge of Meadowbrook Estates, a quiet community where we'd lived peacefully for 8 years. The homeowners association had always been reasonable, until Karen Blackwood moved in and somehow manipulated herself into the HOA president position. Karen was everything wrong with suburban power. She was a woman in her 50s who dressed like she was attending a country club luncheon even when checking her mailbox. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her nails always perfectly manicured, and her voice always perfectly sharp when she was finding fault with others, which was constantly. She had moved to our neighborhood after a messy divorce, bringing with her a bitterness that seemed to poison everything she touched. Within 6 months, she had filed complaints against half the residents for everything from unsightly garden gnomes to inappropriate mailbox colors. The trouble with us started small, as these things always do. First, she complained that our fence was 2 inches taller than the community standards allowed. When we proved it was actually within regulations, she claimed our small vegetable garden was lowering property values because it wasn't aesthetically consistent with the neighborhood's vision. But her real target became clear when she set her sights on Whisper. "That animal is completely inappropriate for this neighborhood," she declared at a community meeting, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The smell, the flies, the constant noise, it's destroying our quality of life." I stood up calmly, my hands steady despite the anger building inside me. "Ma'am, we've checked all local zoning laws multiple times. Our property is properly zoned for 1 horse, and we maintain it according to all city and county regulations." Her face flushed red and her eyes narrowed into slits. "Laws can be changed, Mr. Patterson. And I fully intend to change them." That was the beginning of our nightmare. Over the following months, Karen launched what could only be described as psychological warfare against our family. She filed complaint after complaint with the city, each one requiring us to pay inspection fees that added up to hundreds of dollars. Every inspection found us in perfect compliance, but that didn't stop her from filing the next complaint. She organized neighborhood meetings, standing in front of our neighbors with professionally printed flyers spreading lies about Whisper being dangerous and our property being a health hazard. She claimed the horse attracted rats, caused mosquito problems, and even suggested that having a farm animal in a residential area was bringing down everyone's property values. Most of our neighbors saw through her lies, but some began to whisper. I started noticing fewer friendly waves, more suspicious glances when I worked in the yard. The worst part was watching what this was doing to Tommy. My bright, confident son began to withdraw. The joy that had always lit up his face when he worked with Whisper started to dim. He'd come home from school to find Karen standing at our fence, filming Whisper with her phone, muttering about collecting evidence for her next complaint. "Dad," Tommy said one evening, his voice barely audible as we sat on the porch. "Maybe we should find Whisper a new home. Maybe Karen would leave us alone then." The defeat in my 12-year-old son's voice shattered something inside me. This child, who had worked so hard and loved so purely, was willing to sacrifice the thing he cherished most because one bitter woman couldn't stand to see others happy. I knelt down and put my hands on his shoulders, looking directly into his eyes, The same gentle eyes that had seen the beauty in a broken horse when others saw only flaws. "Son," I said firmly, "sometimes in life bullies try to take away everything that makes us happy. They think that if they can't be happy, nobody else should be either. But we don't give up on family. And Whisper is family now." Tommy nodded, but I could see the worry still clouding his young face. Karen had succeeded in making a child afraid in his own home, and that was unforgivable. The harassment escalated. Karen called animal control so frequently that the officers began to know our address by heart. Each visit required time off work, each false report went on a record somewhere. She filed noise complaints claiming Whisper's occasional nickering was disturbing the peace at all hours. She even went so far as to call the health department, claiming our farm operation was contaminating the neighborhood water supply. Every complaint was investigated. Every complaint was found to be baseless. But the stress was wearing on all of us. Tommy's grades began to slip. He started having nightmares about losing Whisper. I found him crying in the barn one evening, his arms wrapped around the mare's neck. "She hates us, Dad," he sobbed. "She hates us so much and I don't understand why." Neither did I. What I did understand was that Karen Blackwood had declared war on my family, and she wouldn't stop until she destroyed everything we held dear. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in late spring. The weather was perfect, warm sunshine, gentle breeze, the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive. I had driven into town to pick up feed and supplies, a routine trip I'd made hundreds of times before. Tommy was planning to spend the morning with Whisper, practicing the basic riding skills he'd been learning. It was supposed to be a perfect day. When I pulled into our driveway 45 minutes later, I could hear Tommy's screams before I even got out of the truck. I ran toward the pasture and found my son kneeling in the dirt, cradling Whisper's head in his lap. The beautiful mare was trembling all over, her breathing labored and pained. Across her back and sides were angry red welts, some of them bleeding where the skin had split open. Tommy's face was streaked with tears and dirt, his voice broken from crying. "Dad, I tried to stop her but she wouldn't listen. She just kept hitting and hitting." "Who?" I demanded, though the rage building inside me made it hard to form words. "Who did this?" Through his sobs, Tommy told me the story. He had been in the house getting Whisper's morning treats when he heard the mare screaming in pain, a sound no horse should ever make. By the time he ran outside, Karen was walking away from the pasture, a leather riding crop in her hand and a satisfied smile on her cruel face. "She said Whisper was standing too close to the fence line," Tommy choked out. "She said she was teaching her proper boundaries. But Dad, Whisper was just eating grass. She wasn't doing anything wrong." I called our veterinarian immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been caring for Whisper since we'd adopted her, and she arrived within 20 minutes of my call. Her face grew increasingly grim as she examined Whisper's injuries. The mare flinched at every touch, her trust in humans badly shaken by the attack. "These wounds are severe," Dr. Martinez said quietly, pulling me aside so Tommy couldn't hear. "Someone beat this animal systematically. This wasn't a single strike in anger, this was deliberate, methodical torture. Look at the pattern of the welts. Someone took their time inflicting maximum pain." The vet bill came to $1,200. Whisper would recover physically, but the psychological damage was harder to measure. The trust in her gentle eyes had been replaced by fear. She shied away from sudden movements, jumped at loud sounds, and worst of all, she seemed afraid of Tommy's touch at first. I filed a police report immediately, providing photos of Whisper's injuries and Tommy's eyewitness account. But the responding officer was Karen's cousin, a fact she had mentioned proudly at neighborhood gatherings. Officer Blackwood barely glanced at the evidence, didn't bother to interview any other potential witnesses, and suggested that the injuries might have been caused by teenagers playing pranks, or possibly a wild animal attack. "These things happen with livestock," he said dismissively, not even bothering to hide his bias. "Maybe you should consider moving that horse somewhere more appropriate." The system had failed us completely. Karen had tortured an innocent animal, traumatized my son, and faced no consequences whatsoever. That night, after Tommy had finally cried himself to sleep, I sat on my porch in the darkness, planning. Karen had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had shown her true nature, someone who would hurt an innocent animal to satisfy her own twisted need for control. The legal system had failed us. The police had failed us. The community leaders had failed us. But there are older forms of justice, older ways of balancing the scales. I knew Karen's routine perfectly. She had made sure the entire neighborhood knew her schedule through her constant complaints and public announcements. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m., she visited her elderly mother at Sunset Manor Nursing Home. She always parked in the same spot, always took the same path through the facility's garden area, always stayed for exactly 1 hour. The plan formed slowly, carefully. Whisper needed exercise as part of her recovery, and Dr. Martinez had specifically recommended gentle trail rides to help her rebuild confidence and heal both physically and emotionally. The trails behind Sunset Manor were perfect for therapeutic riding, wide, well-maintained, and frequently used by the local equestrian community. It was completely legal, completely innocent, completely justifiable. Tuesday arrived gray and overcast, with heavy clouds promising rain later in the day. I helped Tommy get ready for school, watching him move with the same defeated posture he'd carried since the attack. His shoulders were slumped, his smile forced, his eyes lacking their usual spark. As his school bus disappeared down the road, I led Whisper out of her stall. The mare was still nervous, flinching at unexpected movements, but she trusted me. We had built that trust over 2 years of patient care, consistent kindness, and genuine love, something Karen Blackwood could never understand. I saddled Whisper carefully, speaking to her in the soft tones that had always calmed her fears. Despite her recent trauma, she responded to my voice, her ears pricking forward with interest rather than fear. We set out on the familiar trail that wound through the woods behind the nursing home. The path was wide and well-maintained, officially designated for equestrian use by the County Parks Department. I had ridden this trail dozens of times over the years, sometimes with Tommy, sometimes alone, always peacefully. At exactly 2:15 p.m., we reached the section of trail that ran parallel to Sunset Manor's garden walkway. A simple 3-foot decorative fence separated the two areas, meant to keep residents safely within the facility grounds, but not designed to contain anything determined to cross it. Karen appeared right on schedule, strutting along the stone path in her designer heels and expensive jewelry. She was talking loudly on her cell phone, complaining to someone about her neighbor's disgraceful lawn maintenance, and threatening to file another complaint. When she spotted us on the trail, her face immediately twisted into that familiar mask of rage and hatred. She ended her phone call abruptly and marched toward the fence, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone path. "You!" she shrieked, pointing that perfectly manicured finger at me like a weapon. "This is harassment. This is stalking. I'm calling the police right now." I remained calm, gently patting Whisper's neck to keep her steady. The mare's muscles were tense beneath me, but she was responding to my guidance. "We're on a public trail, Mrs. Blackwood," I said evenly. "Perfectly legal recreational riding as recommended by our veterinarian for Whisper's recovery." "Recovery from what?" she sneered, though we both knew exactly what she meant. "From the beating you gave her," I replied quietly. "The systematic torture you inflicted on an innocent animal because you enjoy causing pain." Her face flushed purple with rage. "I don't know what you're talking about. And even if I did discipline that beast, it needed to learn some respect." She grabbed a fallen tree branch from the ground, raising it above her head like a club. Several elderly residents had gathered at the facility's windows, drawn by her shouting. "That vicious animal should be put down," she screamed. "And people like you should learn your place in this community." She swung the branch through the air, not quite reaching us but clearly intending it as a threat. "I should have hit it harder. Maybe then you people would finally understand who's in charge here." That was her fatal mistake. Threatening Whisper again in front of witnesses, while wielding a makeshift weapon. Something changed in Whisper at that moment. Despite her recent trauma, despite her fear, the mare remembered who had hurt her. Her ears pinned back against her head, and I felt her entire body coil like a spring. Karen raised the branch again, this time stepping closer to the fence. "I'll teach that animal the same lesson I taught it before." Whisper had endured enough. The gentle mare who had never harmed anyone, who had shown nothing but love and trust to the humans who cared for her, finally reached her breaking point. She reared up on her hind legs, her front hooves striking the air, then lunged forward with surprising speed and power. The decorative fence was only 3 feet tall, designed to mark boundaries, not to stop a determined 1,000-pound animal. Whisper cleared the fence easily, landing squarely on the garden path just feet from Karen. The woman stumbled backward, her designer heels catching on the uneven stones. She went down hard, the branch flying from her hands as she hit the ground. I could have stopped it then. Could have pulled back on the reins, called Whisper to heel, been the better person. But in that moment, watching the woman who had tortured my son's beloved horse cowering on the ground, I made a conscious choice. I let the reins go slack. Whisper, driven by memory of pain and the instinct to protect her family, reared again. Her hooves came down with the full force of natural justice behind them. The first blow caught Karen across the shoulder and chest, spinning her around and slamming her into the stone path. The sound of breaking ribs was audible even over her screams. The second strike landed squarely on her lower back with a sickening crack that echoed across the garden. Karen's spine compressed under the impact, vertebrae shifting in ways they were never meant to move. Her screams changed pitch, becoming higher, more desperate, filled with a pain she had never imagined possible. Her perfectly styled hair was now matted with dirt and tears. Her designer outfit was torn and stained with blood. "Please," she gasped, trying to crawl away but finding her legs wouldn't respond. "Stop it. Make it stop. I'm sorry." I leaned forward in the saddle, speaking just loud enough for her to hear over her own cries of agony. "This is what pain feels like, Karen," I said quietly. "This is what you gave to an innocent animal who never hurt anyone. This is what you put my family through every single day with your cruelty and hatred." Whisper, as if understanding every word, delivered one final, devastating blow. Her hoof caught Karen's spine with surgical precision, and the woman's legs went completely still. The sudden silence from her lower body was more terrifying than her screams had been. I gently guided Whisper away from the broken figure on the ground. The mare was breathing hard but seemed calmer, as if a weight had been lifted from her spirit. The fear that had haunted her eyes since the beating was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like satisfaction. The silence that followed was broken only by Karen's sobbing and the distant sound of sirens. One of the nursing home staff had called for emergency assistance. Karen lay crumpled on the stone path, her perfect facade finally stripped away to reveal the broken, pitiful creature underneath. She tried to move her legs but couldn't, the reality of her situation beginning to sink in through the shock and pain. "I can't feel my legs," she whispered, her voice small and frightened for the first time since I'd known her. "I can't feel anything." The paramedics arrived first, followed quickly by police cars and an ambulance. As they worked frantically to stabilize Karen and load her onto a stretcher, one of the officers approached me. "Sir, we need to talk about what happened here." I dismounted slowly, keeping my hands visible and my voice calm. "Of course, officer. There was an accident." The investigation was thorough but ultimately reached the conclusion I had expected. Multiple witnesses from the nursing home confirmed that Karen had been screaming threats and wielding a stick when the incident occurred. The elderly residents told anyone who would listen about the horrible woman who was always yelling at everyone. Dr. Martinez provided detailed testimony about Whisper's previous injuries, complete with photographs and medical documentation proving systematic abuse. Tommy's school counselor spoke about the psychological trauma he had suffered from months of harassment. The official report concluded that Karen had provoked a previously traumatized animal, resulting in a tragic accident. No criminal charges were filed against me. Karen survived, but her spine was irreparably damaged. 3 vertebrae had been completely shattered, and the spinal cord was severed in 2 places. She would spend the rest of her life paralyzed from the waist down, dependent on others for even the most basic human needs. The irony was poetic in its completeness. The woman who had built her entire identity around controlling and tormenting others was now powerless, helpless, unable to hurt anyone ever again. The HOA quietly removed her from the presidency and revised their policies to explicitly protect residents' rights to keep properly maintained livestock. Karen's house went up for sale within a month, though she struggled to find buyers willing to deal with the reputation she had built in the community. Tommy's transformation was remarkable to witness. Within days of Karen's departure from the neighborhood, his smile began to return. He spent hours with Whisper and slowly, patiently, the mare's trust in humans was rebuilt. The physical scars on Whisper's coat faded over time, but more importantly, the fear in her eyes was replaced by the gentle peace she had known before Karen's attack. She began to nicker softly when she heard Tommy's voice again, began to follow him around the pasture like she used to. One evening, about 6 weeks after the incident, I found Tommy in the barn brushing Whisper's coat until it gleamed in the lamplight. He looked up at me with eyes full of gratitude and something else, a new understanding of how the world really worked. "Dad," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on us." I knelt down beside him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Son, family protects family. Always. No matter what it costs, no matter what people say, we protect the ones we love." Whisper nickered softly, nuzzling Tommy's cheek with the same gentle affection she had always shown. Justice, I realized, sometimes comes on 4 hooves and serves itself with perfect precision. The lawsuit came 6 months later, delivered by a lawyer in an expensive suit who spoke about intentional infliction of harm and premeditated assault. Karen was demanding millions in damages, claiming I had deliberately caused her injuries and destroyed her quality of life. I handed the threatening letter to my own attorney with a smile. Let her try to prove intentional harm when every witness, every expert, and every piece of evidence supported the same conclusion. A traumatized animal had defended itself against its abuser. The case was dismissed within 3 months. Karen's credibility was destroyed by her own documented history of harassment, animal abuse, and the testimony of dozens of neighbors who had suffered under her reign of terror. The judge's final words still echo in my memory. "Mrs. Blackwood, you brought this situation entirely upon yourself through your own cruel and illegal actions. This court will not reward someone for provoking the very consequences they created through their own malicious behavior." As I write this story today, 5 years have passed since that Tuesday afternoon in the garden. Tommy is 17 now, a confident young man who still spends every morning with Whisper before school. The mare is older but still gentle, still trusting, still the beating heart of our small family. Karen lives in a care facility 3 states away now, in a place that specializes in severe spinal injuries. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that she's become something of a model patient, quiet, polite, no longer interested in controlling or hurting others. Pain and helplessness have a way of teaching lessons that kindness never could. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened that day. The answer is simple and honest. I feel the same peace that Whisper feels when she runs free in the pasture, the same satisfaction that Tommy feels when he accomplishes something he's worked hard for, the same sense of rightness that anyone feels when justice is finally, truly served. The world is full of bullies like Karen Blackwood, people who mistake cruelty for strength, who believe that hurting others makes them powerful, who cannot bear to see others happy when they themselves are miserable. But for every bully there's someone willing to stand up, to fight back, to ensure that kindness and love are protected from those who would destroy them. Sometimes that protection comes through legal channels, sometimes through community action, and sometimes through the simple, natural justice of consequences meeting actions in the most direct way possible. Karen learned the hardest lesson of all, that power built on cruelty is nothing but an illusion. Real strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves, from standing up when it would be easier to back down, from choosing love over fear even when the cost is high. Whisper taught us all that lesson in her own gentle way. She endured abuse with dignity, learned to trust again after betrayal, and when the moment came for justice, she delivered it with the precision that only the truly innocent can possess. In the end, this isn't really a story about revenge. It's a story about family, about the lengths we'll go to protect those we love, and about the natural order of the universe reasserting itself when human systems fail to protect the innocent. It's about a boy and his horse, a father's love for his son, and the simple truth that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. And sometimes they win on horseback, with justice served by hooves and the unbreakable bond between a child and the animal who needed him as much as he needed her.